So I'm very excited that to have this topic today, because we're going to be talking about teams in the context of an actual application, not just generic teams, but teams in the context of an application. And I am the least important person on the course of this, so I will be dropping my video and listening along with all of you all. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott Money from DocPoint, and you can get started. Thank you, Scott.
All right, John, thank you very much. And it's always great to have you on our webinars as our MC. You always do such a great job. So thank you all for attending this session. My name is Scott Money. I'm the Director of Operations with DocPoint Solutions. And also joining us today is the infamous Jeanese Raymond, who will be presenting today. So Jeanese is a Regional Operations Director and also is the leader of this initiative. So this is based on a Teams presentation that we did back in June 2023. It was an EduCon event in Washington, D.C. So some of our attendees may have seen parts of this before, and for some it's also new. So there was such a big draw to this session. We actually ran out of space in the room. We went over capacity and had to start limiting. We couldn't let anyone else in the room. It was so popular. So we thought it was a great opportunity to present this as a formal webinar and also to produce a recording out of it for future use. So onto the overview of this. So we usually use use cases that are based on our customer solutions. However, today's a little bit different. This was actually our own business case. It was an internal need within our operations team that drove this. So what we needed all project metrics for our engagements in a dashboard we could see in like a single interface. So as our operations teams were expanding, we had more and more work coming in. We had more projects, which obviously created a need for more detailed reporting and also the frequency at which we need access to that information. So we were actually a little bit siloed on that part. We could track everything. We had everything that we needed. However, getting to that information was a little bit of a challenge. So there were three main areas that we had to address. So we had one piece of a solution that was called our project on-ramp. And what that had was everything related to the creation of the account and the actual project. So it was a workflow and forms type solution in our 365 environment. We created the account code, the project number, tasks, hours, and things like period of performance. So we always had access to that in one UI. The second piece we had was the hours tracking. So obviously we have timesheet system, as many of you do. That was tied directly to our accounting system. So we could always get all the hours that were fed back on a project. So we could go back and track, how many hours we've used, what we've utilized, what we have left. But we never had a graphic representation of that. So what we would have to do, our third item, was we would have to go on a frequent basis. We'd have to bother our accounting team multiple times a week so that we could get all of our totals back, compare them to our spreadsheets that we were tracking separately. And it just became very, very cumbersome. So we needed a way to put all of these together, tie them all in so that we could see a single UI and get all of the information that we needed from that one interface. So what we ended up doing, Jeanese led this effort, and with the help of our operations development teams, came up with a nice little platform solution, and it ended up being in Teams. So that's why we're here today. So I'm going to pass this on to Jeanese Raymond. So Jeanese, if you want to say hello, and you can go ahead and get started on your part.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much. So that was a great introduction and backstory. So in effort, I needed to provide standardization and simplification across how we captured our data for our team, providing the work for our projects, and then to kind of standardize it as we grew and became a national team. We also needed to improve the analytics process. As Scott said, we were capturing it, but it was very redundant. It was spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet with all the links. So For those of you that are out there participating and listening, I want you to start thinking about how you use your work today and how you could apply it moving forward. Because I'm going to focus on how I use the Microsoft platform, specifically Power Apps within Teams, but this is applicable to everyone out there. Third thing was to provide integration. We all know redundant data entry is an issue and leads to errors. So how do we take all that and provide a great scenario? Well, it starts with the adoption of Teams, believe it or not. As Scott said, I'm 20 plus years in this industry. I started off as a managing always teams, managing projects. So I always practice what I want my customers to achieve. And so our early stage of adoption started with just the use of Microsoft Teams to handle chat, calendar, and calls. So we had project managers on the East Coast, project managers on the West Coast. So I'm sure we're all familiar with how this works. I'm going to go down and grab my mouse. So standard in Teams, you can do your speed dial. You have your calls, so you can call your friends, call your team, use the calendar. This was very integral in making sure we were working together. And then the chat, very distinguishable between a chat in a meeting versus a chat with a person. So we start with that process. And it worked very well. The team started communicating because we needed to standardize. I need to know how East Coast runs their projects. How do they communicate with their customers? Evolved into us now using Teams. So one of the best things that I really like about Teams is the back end is SharePoint. And so what we did was we grew and started creating a team for a specific purpose. So we had the DocPoint PMO team. We used files to start putting all of our documentation that we had in there. Wrong one. So like your kickoff deck, how we tracked information, very slow incremental standardization. And then let's use the whole tab feature. So maybe it's just simple and I need a link to a spreadsheet. So you can do that here. This one looks like a calendar. And then continuing to evolve, which brings us to, we work well in chat. We all use the same calendar functions. We're collaborating through calls. Now we've centralized by function how the team works, focusing really mainly on our project managers. Comes into this last stage in which I call advanced adoption of teams, where I use the Power Automate flows. I use Power Apps integration, and I come in and layer Power BI, whether it's a dashboard or a report or a paginated report, to provide all that information. So way back when, Scott introduced the concept that we were using Excel spreadsheets. That information, I lost my.
That doesn't seem like all that long ago we were in the spreadsheets, Jeanese.
It was not, Scott. It was about 7 months ago.
Right, yeah.
And those spreadsheets turned into a function-focused app for our project managers. And when I say a function-focused app, I'm really talking about what was that core function that we needed our project managers to do well, to give operations management the information, to give executive the information, also to abide by our scopes of work. We needed to track project resource hours. I needed to monitor our project budget hours. And I needed a quick way for them to approve time and attendance, because time and attendance is in a separate system. And finally, encapsulate that with a standardized weekly or monthly status report. Simple, right? Simple.
Simple.
It is. because the core of this is only 3 lists. Integration comes from our on-ramp, so the system that you mentioned at the beginning where our sales team puts in the project metrics is our first point of integration, and that leads us into the demo. So I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to walk everyone through this, not all the way in detail, but enough to give you the concept and idea. With me? With me.
I'm with you, Jeanese.
Perfect. I said 3 lists, and this core system really revolves around 3 lists. My projects, which we're going to look at SharePoint. It's never pretty, but it's worth a peek. Here's my projects list. We integrated with the on-ramp system, and so the on-ramp system has a flow in which the person who creates that time code enters it into the on-ramp system, and a flow copies it here and sends an email. So that's how this gets populated. And when it gets populated, we have to have a budget. So that flow that creates the project creates the budget. I'm using the concept of a relational database. So project code to project code is how these are related. And the last thing that I have to track is who does what when for which project, and that's stored here in the time entry details. Okay, 3 core systems, not very pretty, but let's see how it evolves into this. So every Friday, we have this trickle up effect of I need time entered, so our PMs open this up. What's the great thing about a Canvas app in Teams is I can have it be a link to a URL or to a Canvas app that shows various information. So our PMs open this up. Our PM also opens up this project time entry, and the time savings is crucial here. We are able to use a Canvas app to display those key components that we need a PM to know when they're entering a project, such as where am I current with my budget per task, because our projects are run through the SDL lifecycle, where we, as you can see on the left hand, we go through business analysis, architect development, UAT, post-project support. We also need to know who worked on it for a time period. So through the Canvas app functionality, we're able to also reduce data entry. We control through automation which time periods are open by calculation. All the projects are listed here. And as you can see, as I select it, we have calculations. So red, I went over budget. That's never a good thing. Keep in mind, this is all sample data. And so as we go through, we can see this. Our PMs can simply type in how many hours someone worked, which life cycle they worked on, who the resource was. Comments are copied and pasted from our other system to reduce data entry. And then click plus. Our PMs actually input data by project. So they will see the entire team's project. And so they can continue this process and we reduce data entry by 2 clicks. When they're ready to move on to their next project, they change it, project changes, and that's how we capture our time entry. What is happening behind the scenes when they click plus, and this is one of the greatest things that I like about Teams, SharePoint, the Microsoft platform. Each of these components were built in separate pieces. For example, the flow that runs on this timesheet is a flow attached to the list item, not to the data entry form. And what we did was I built that list first, built the flow, and the flow will calculate and update the used hours for that particular project, thus automatically providing me real-time budget information for the project. When we layered on the Teams Canvas app, I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to call it. I didn't have to make a change. The existing flow stayed the same. So this is the core. This is where our PMs stay all day in the environment. After that comes the reporting section. Now, the reporting could be a dashboard, which is pinned. It could be something that we print. One of the biggest challenges that we've understood from customers that start using Power BI is the refresh rate. So imagine on a Friday, we have 4 or 5 PMs. They each put their timesheet system. You don't want to do a refresh data every 5 minutes because it does add extensive resource. You want to give them the option to run it sometimes on demand. So really quick, we can build this Power Automate. Some Power Automates live in your Canvas app, and it will go through and refresh all the data sets. These are links to Power BI reports, and this gives you the ability, we'll just kind of go through. Now I can provide to management, we capture our projects by what type of, are they support-based or are they project-based? So management can see where we're spending billable time by project, perhaps which tasks are for that time period. We can also come through and see breakdown by resources, by company, filter in by resource. Let's see where Scott's spending most of his time. Focus only on one company. Now I'm not creating a multitude of reports. I've understood what management needs. And then come another piece we mentioned we needed to standardize. Here's another standardization that we've been able to use is the Power BI reports and paginated reports. Our customers, to achieve part of our scope of work, is to provide them either weekly or monthly reports in which they use that to reconcile against the invoices we send. Our PMs all have the same report, which used to be copied and pasted into Excel. So you can about imagine the problems there. Now they can just select the project that they're responsible for. Through auto filtering, we supply the date range, and then we can have the overall status, the details, and then our PMs can either choose to export it to PowerPoint or to PDF, and now their weekly status report has been cut down to merely entering in the time and clicking 2 buttons. They can get their reports out to their customers that quick. Now, I want to go back here to the system because right now I've shown you a Canvas app that's dedicated to one list. You can also take a list. We talked about our projects and our budgets, and it lives in the same system, but I need different people to interact with, so I can make a separate Canvas app out. And this one, you're going to see a different look and feel because sometimes you can have fun with the UI, and this is one that just is a little bit more colorful. And this one shows some nice, different, unique features and functionality. So I'm about managing my projects. This add button is security trimmed. So project managers do not have the ability to on-ramp projects into the on-ramp system. Scott and I do as operations directors and sales staff. So if something comes up and I need to on-ramp, I can click this button. Here's a different look and feel. This is the information that is captured for the on-ramp and lives in a completely different system. So this is another example of a Canvas app integration in which I'm bringing data from one system in. You can do nice things as seeing previously submitted systems. And then within my projects, it's 2 different lists that we can combine information. So as new projects come in, our PMs have to set them up. We show the information here that is relevant for the PM. And also through that automated process, I said that we get the project here, we provide a link back to OnRamp and have eliminated copying, emailing, attaching, and having 50 versions of the statement of work. It will only live in OnRamp, and the PMs use this to get to the documentation, fill in any new information such as hourly rate, and then manage the status and click save. And then from here, they can switch the hours tab and set up that original budget for the project. We continue to evolve and grow this as projects are, and you can do filtering and sorting. So I can see at a quick glance anything on hold, at risk, in progress. As we mark projects complete, we have further automation that will send an email to our finance and accounting department to let them know that they need to close it in their systems and that the PO needs to be marked closed, and that would be marked as final billing. This avoids us having to send so many emails and pieces of information. So that's just kind of two examples of the process and information. And I'm going to just pull back for a second and I'm going to summarize what we looked at. So this really started through Microsoft Teams and a reduction of separate files through the creation of 3 lists and bringing in the Power Apps within Teams. We used Canvas apps, which are a Canvas app is a screen that is not directly connected to a data source. So you build your data source or data sources separately. You can call them as collections. Some of them are data driven only because they made sense. So generally, like your lookup lists, like your tasks that are lookup lists. And then we used Power Automate. What's nice about Power Automate is sometimes you're going to pull that Power Automate, like my data refresh. It's encapsulated in that team because that's where it gets used. And then on top of the data, we layer in Power BI. I only showed a few of the reports, but we have several ones that we provide for our executive management, some that we use to reduce our PMs. And then anything that I built in Power Automate before did not have to get rebuilt. So this was a great way of how we slowly brought in and then evolved over time. So with that, I know we had a few Q&As, so I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, perfect, Jeanese. Thank you. And yeah, this was something that came, we didn't need any, in this case, any third-party products. We were able to solve this with the 365 tenant apps that were already there. So, and something else that's really helped us with, as Jeanese was mentioning, is the speed and the accessibility to the information. So it was several phone calls. We felt like we were putting a bigger burden on our accounting department than we really needed to. But this has been great. So it doesn't seem like even that long ago also we were on-prem with this. We just moved it 2 years ago, I think, right around the time of the pandemic. So it's been a great addition to our team. So I appreciate you covering that. So we do have a couple of questions, Jeanese. So the first one from Basala is, so I have a basic question. As Jeanese mentioned, that the Power App is connected to the SharePoint list that she created. So if we integrate the Power App with one of the Teams channels, are the SharePoint sites kept common for both? So I think that's just the relationship between anything that we change in the app itself. Does it update the SharePoint list at the same time?
From a form perspective, yes, because I save the data. From the Power Automate and Flow perspective, we actually built the flows first, and because the form is still interacting with the SharePoint list, it's updating it. Now, we use SharePoint because that's, as Scott said, that's part of our platform and I can make it work in there. We know other customers that create, but their connections are Oracle or SQL or Azure Cloud, could be Salesforce. You're not constrained to SharePoint. We used it because that's what we had available.
Yeah,
I
and I
hope
guess
that
in this
answers your
case,
question.
yeah, I think in this case also, we're pulling data for the most part after it's input to use as a reporting tool. Not quite as much massaging of the data as it is in the list already, but that was just my 2 cents. We have a couple other questions here. So let's see. How often is the data updated in the dashboard? I think you said that's a manual process. Is any of that
It's a
automated?
well, yes, it is. So we meet on Mondays to have our forecasting meeting. So on Friday afternoons, I have it do a refresh when all time is supposed to be submitted. And then I refresh it on Monday mornings in case any time entries came over the weekend. That's really the only 2 times that we pull most of those reports, or they get used because the data does not get touched during the middle of the week because that's not when we do time entries. So answer is, it is customizable by your situation. So you can schedule multiple refreshes, and through Power Automate, you can by trigger call a manual data refresh.
Perfect. And the next one, this is regarding RPA. Did you consider using RPA for any of the background tasks?
Yes, we actually did. As you know, RPA, robotic process automation, is really around that repetitive task, repetitive task, repetitive task. You want to keep it very light on decision making. So first off, I did investigate and try running proof of concepts where the automation came through the data entry process, where it would be copy paste, but that one, even though it would have to be manually triggered, we know through various screen websites and different people's screen resolutions, RPA sometimes can be a bit of a problem. So that was really the only repetitive one that we saw a potential opportunity, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, and perhaps in the future, I know we're going to integrate this maybe in a couple more points that would probably, RPA would come into play in those cases. We're just not quite there yet.
Correct.
And our third, so we have another question here. Is the main UI created out of the box, or is it custom code? So I think that's referencing that main panel you showed with the 6 icons.
Yes. So I can go back and show a different
Sure.
version. Perfect. What's great about these tools is when you're internal, you can have fun with them. But when you're customer facing, sometimes it's not always best. So one of our versions is really fun and lively. Our East Coast side of the team really love sharks. So we can have fun with the UI in which it moves. There's sharks that jump up. Most of all that, what's the beauty about that is it's CSS, but it's really copy paste. There's a lot of intuitiveness to as you're building this and developing it. So as you can see, you can make them fun and playful. You can do the highlights. There's a lot of code. Some of it, to be honest, you can find in GitHub. So if you look at the one here in the project time entry, there's a lot of source code that exists. So this is one that we, grab somewhere else, and then you plug in some code. So it's a mix of both. Super easy, to be really honest here with everyone. Evolving also means evolving on your farm. So this farm started with very simple, I build what I can, to proof of concept. And then when I get it working and we're ready for the next stage, then I go to our technical resources who have higher skill sets. And so, that's the best way we found for one, maintaining support, two, building what you need and not overbuilding, and actually growing adoption, because it's not too much change at once. It's a slow evolving process. That was a whole talk off of branding, but super simple to super fun and complex and easily adoptable to your how you do data entry, which is what we love about this product.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. And a couple more comments. So this has really helped also with the efficiency, right? I mentioned before, it's really helped with our turnaround times, and also the accuracy, right? So we would sometimes, our team members would be going back their emails, looking for other statements of work in order to find out what the account code is and tracking all over the place. So it's really helped with the accuracy as well, because we have all that data in one place and it's always there, which is that on-ramp platform.
And it's a trickle down of cost savings, because if
Exactly.
our PMs spend less time maintaining and managing the project, then our time is reduced and they spend more time providing the customer service experience.
Right. And then ultimately this helps with our leadership, right? Because we're accountable for all the projects, the utilization, where we're spending our time. If something goes over, why did it go over and where did it go over? So it's the accountability aspect there as well that's come into play. So again, it's really helped a lot. So again, if you have any other questions, you can type them in that Q&A area. A couple more comments I'd like to make. So Jeanese, I want to thank you for taking the time to go through this again. I know the EduCon event, it was a big success. And everyone really enjoyed this. So I'm glad we have a chance to go back, revisit it, and record this so we can share it in the future with other customers and other fellow business partners as well. So, so I guess with that, yeah, thank you to everyone. I appreciate your time today. We're used a little bit less time than what we probably thought we were. We always usually reserve an hour, but we'll give you a little bit of time back today. So if you have any questions about capabilities or any more details about how this solution was implemented, feel free to reach out to John Burgess and Doug Yates. Their contact information is in the slide here. And of course, that will be available as well in the recording. So with that, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.